Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about the miniatures skirmish game, I guess, Battlestar Galactica Starship Battles. This came out in 2018, which is the same time I acquired it. I think I pre-ordered it. I can't remember. Anyway, I played it a few times when I first got it, and then hadn't played it again recently, so probably not since 2018. Recently, I started rewatching the series Battlestar Galactica, and that made me think of this, so I pulled it out and thought I'd go ahead and do a video of how to set up and play. So let's get started with setup. Alright, the first thing we're going to go over is the quick start rules. Those are the basic, most simple rules. First thing it says is to have a 30 by 30 play space, so I'm just going to use this play space I've got here. That's pretty close to 30 by 30 if I only go over to this area here. First thing you'll do is have one player be the colonial player, so he'll take a colonial ship and put it on its base. Now when you first get the game, you'll need to put the stickers. You have an A, and it comes with two colonial Vipers and two Cylon Raiders, and two bases for each side. So one you'll put a sticker for A, and one you'll put a sticker for B on both sides. But in the quick start rules, if you're just playing two players and you're going to play one ship each, you can play two ships each if that's what you want to, but just for this rules demonstration, I'm just going to show using one ship each. So the colonial player will take one of his ships and put it on a base that's been labeled. You'll also take a matching ID tag and a control panel and place that ID tag like so it matches the tag on your ship or ships. Now these control panels, they're just gray, solid gray. I used some colored markers to kind of highlight some of the details on the control panel, but I just wanted to mention that when you get them, when you buy the game, they're just solid gray. Alright, and so the Cylon player will do the same thing here. He's got a ship with a base labeled A and a control panel with an ID also labeled A. Each player will take a maneuver deck. The colonial side will say Colonial Viper on it like that. And the Cylon's maneuver deck will say Cylon Raider. If you're playing with two ships each, then you would have one maneuver deck and one control panel for each ship. For the quick start rules, you'll remove from your maneuver deck this change direction card and this card that has a star on it. Each of the maneuver decks will have those, so for the quick start rules, just remove those from your deck. It also says for each player to take a base template and a ship card for his spaceship and one combat ruler. Last, you'll take the damage counters that look like this and put them in some kind of opaque container. I just put them in this draw bag, but anyway, you put them all. There's more than what I just had in my hand, if you can see there. Anyway, you put all the damage counters in some kind of container that you can draw out of, or flip them upside down and put them in a pile on the board somewhere. You'll be drawing those when you take damage. There are some other counters that come with the game, but for the quick start rules, the only other counters you'll need to put somewhere nearby are these difficult maneuver counters. Then it says to choose a scenario from the scenario book. It suggests for your first time using the quick start rules to use scenario 5, the scenario Hand of God, which is on page 5. It gives a little description. Now here it says for players 2 to 4, use 2 Vipers and 2 Raiders. Again, for this demonstration, I'm just going to use 1 Viper and 1 Raider. And it does have a little different size of playing area. Here it says use a 36 by 28 instead of what the rule book says, so I guess it depends on scenario. Still, again, I'm just going to be limited to my play area here. It really won't matter for this demonstration. It says put the Cylon Raiders are placed on their side as shown here, so I'm just going to put it over here. And the Colonial Vipers are placed on their side, so that is going to be over here, kind of how it's shown in the map like this. Now here it shows they've got some asteroids and planetoids, but those are in variant rules. I'm not going to include those right now. I will talk about those later. But it says the victory condition is the side that destroys all enemy spacecraft. You can see that there are other variants playing with a larger number of spaceships, again adding the planetoids and asteroids and adding pilots. Again, those are not part of the quick setup rules, which I'm going to go over right now. We'll talk about those later. So in the game turn, there'll be 3 steps in the quick start rules. There'll be the plan step, the movement step, and the firing step. Or a weapons step, where you'll fire your weapons. So in the plan step, players will simultaneously choose a maneuver card from their maneuver deck and set a speed that they're going to use on their control panel. You've got either reverse, stop, speed 1, speed 2, speed 3, and faster than light, which that's not used in the quick start rules. These other kinetic energy and altitude, those are not used in the quick start rules. Neither is the rotation dial. So when the quick start rules will only be concerned with the speed and the maneuver cards. So let's look at a maneuver card. If you were going to play this maneuver card, when it comes time to do your movement, you will place whichever section of the maneuver card you choose according to your speed. So if on your control panel you chose 2 movement speed, you set your control to that, then you will be executing this number 2 speed line. So when it comes time to movement, you would put that number 2 speed line, you'd line it up with that notch right there under the 0, and then you would pick up your ship and move the base of it so that its notch fits in right there. And then you remove the maneuver card, and that's how you moved that turn. So in the planning stage or step, you're looking at all these maneuver cards, choosing one for the maneuver you want to take, and choosing a speed for the maneuver that you want to take on the card you choose. You'll, when you've chosen, you'll keep your control panel setting and your chosen maneuver card face down until all players have chosen. Then you'll reveal simultaneously the maneuver you chose and the speed you set on your control panel. After players have revealed their chosen maneuver card and speed, then they'll take turns, go ahead and doing their movement according to their speed and maneuver card. It really doesn't matter what order you do. Everybody completes their movement. You just take turns doing it. It may be as the ships get closer together that when a ship ends its movement, its base would overlap that of another ship. In that case, in the quick start rules, you go ahead, whichever ship was set to a faster speed, you just advance it in a straight line until its base would no longer overlap the previous ship's base. If both ships were set to the same speed, then you just decide randomly which ship has to advance further so that the bases no longer overlap. Now, as a penalty, Any ships that had to do that their bases overlapped after they finished their movement, then they do not get to fire in the weapons step. They just have to end their round at that point, so they will not get to fire during the weapons step. So before we get into the weapon step, let's talk a little bit more about movement. If you had set your slider to the stop position, then even though you still choose a maneuver card and reveal a maneuver card, you just don't execute the maneuver. Your ship, when you reveal that your control panel is set to stop, then your ship just stays where it is no matter which maneuver card you reveal. If you set your control panel here to the backward movement, then you would have to have chosen a maneuver card that has a backward maneuver, and it would look like this. It would have one arrow coming into another arrow. So as when I mentioned, when you execute movement for a normal card, you put it on the front, matching the notch, and then move the base forward like that. When you do one when you planned a backward movement, instead you place it so that the notch matches up with the notch on the back of your ship, and then just move the base back like so. And then the other settings I've already mentioned. If you choose setting 1 on your maneuver card, then you would move according to the number 1 there and just move your base to there. If you set your setting to speed 2 or speed 3, then you would choose and maneuver to the speed 2 or 3 like it shows there. Some maneuver cards that you can choose have a overboost symbol on them, as you can see here. It has this arrow over these stack columns. That's the overboost symbol. When you choose one of those as your maneuver card, you also choose another non-overboost card, and you'll play both of those, face down and then reveal them together. Now, one thing to keep in mind is these cards have a G-force indicator on them. When you're playing an overboost card with another card, you cannot have a total greater than 4G. So this one's 2 and a 0. You could play this one with this overboost card, but I couldn't play a regular maneuver card with a 3G force symbol on it, because the 2 and a 3 would add up to more than 4, so that wouldn't be legal. But you could play a 2 and a 0, a 2 and a 1, and a 2 and a 2. As long as the total of G-forces on the combined cards is not more than 4, it's okay. So when you reveal and execute that, you first do the overboost. So you place that card first, and then depending on what speed setting you set for this maneuver, in this case it's set to 2, so then I would then put the 2, the one with the 2, next to that overboost red space, and then that is where you end up maneuvering your ship to. And then you end up removing your cards, and then that's the new position of your ship. Now, I did want to mention that when doing overboost, your speed cannot be set to stopped or standing still or reverse. So you can only do overboost if you're set at speed 1, 2, or 3. One other maneuver I wanted to show was this icon, which is the difficult maneuver. So if you select that, maybe you were at speed 2 and you do the difficult maneuver that has this icon, you then have to take one of these difficult maneuver tokens and put that in your area. And the next time you choose a maneuver for the next round, you cannot choose another maneuver that is also a difficult maneuver, nor can you do an overboost. So you would have to wait. Once you've taken your next maneuver phase where you didn't choose an overboost or a difficult maneuver, then you can remove that token, and then in any future round you can choose a difficult maneuver again. Now there is one exception to that. If you've done a difficult maneuver in the next round, I said you can't do an overboost, but you can, but only if that overboost card is a straight overboost marked with this straight symbol. So as long as it's that, then you could, even if you had a difficult maneuver token in your area because you had done a difficult maneuver the previous round, you can't do any overboost unless it is a straight overboost like that. And then you can do that one, but not any of the others. If you end up revealing your maneuver cards and your control panel and you've done an illegal move like using G-forces over 4, or if you had moved your slider into the reverse position but you play a maneuver card that doesn't have a reverse position on it, or if you reveal a difficult maneuver when you had done one the previous round and had the difficult maneuver token in your area, then you have to take these steps. You have to move your speed slider to wherever it was the previous round. Then you have to find your straight maneuver card and move your ship according to the straight line, whichever speed you were at. So the speed you were at the previous round, you've got to move back to that, and then you've got to move straight in that direction depending on what that speed was. Then you have to draw a damage token and put that damage token in your area. We haven't talked about damage yet, but I will here shortly. But as a penalty for doing a maneuver that you shouldn't have or couldn't do, you do have to draw a damage token. If a ship wouldn't move out of the defined play area, for instance, if the Cylon Raider had done this straight maneuver here, that would move him out of my defined play area, which is the edge of my board here, then the ship is just eliminated. So anytime a ship would move out of the play area, it's eliminated. After all ships have moved, you go to the firing step where you'll determine if any ship has another ship in its range and within its firing arc. If more than one ship is able to fire on another ship because they have it in their range and firing arc, then everybody that's able to fire has to be, before any attacks are made, all ships that are able to fire have to declare what target they're going to be firing at before any dice are rolled and attacks are made. You can see the ships have a firing arc here. I think I highlighted this in red. I don't think it was originally red there. It's just an indentation with an arrow there. I think I took a red marker and highlighted that if I remember correctly. But so to determine if a ship is in your firing arc, you can take this range ruler, and for instance, if this ship was firing at this guy, you could see it as long as its base, any part of its base is within your firing arc, then you can shoot at it. Now, this guy's firing arc, he would not be able to fire at this Cylon here. So that this kind of, this is what came with the game. What's easier for me is if you have one of these laser things, and then you can just use that to determine, your firing arc. So I kind of like that, but what the game comes with this is this range ruler. So you determine if it's in your firing arc and if it's within range. If it's anywhere, if you can touch the base of your target within range of this ruler, then it is in range. If you're playing with multiple ships and you had another ship in between your target, like if there was another Cylon Raider here that was blocking the line of sight to the target, then you can't shoot through that other ship, so you wouldn't have line of sight. So after you've determined if you have line of sight to your target, you then determine the range. So you still use this range ruler, and you measure from the base, the post there. This post. You measure from that post, from the attacker to the nearest point of the base of the target. And if you're within the red here, then you're at short range. If you're in the orange, like we are here, so this would be medium range. And if you're out here in the light brown, then that would be long range. If your target is in the red here, then at short range you get +1 to your die roll. If you're in the medium range, you get no addition, 0 addition to your die roll. And if it's in the light brown here, you get -1 to your die roll. And we can see that it does have +1 if you're in red, a 0 if you're in the orange, and -1. So here we determined that this target is in line of sight if this guy was firing at him and in medium range. So then you roll 2 dice, and your ship card determines what you need to roll. So you look at the attack value. For the Viper, the attack value is 6, and for the Cylon Raider, there's 6. So you have to roll a 6 or greater, and that includes your die modifier. So if you were in close range, then you really only need to roll a 5 or greater, because you add 1, which would give you 6. If you're in the medium range like we are here, you would have to roll a 6 or greater. And if you were in the long range, then you'd have to roll a 7 or greater, because again, that gives you a -1, and you have to get at least a 6. Now, yeah, this is in the base game. There are some expansion ships that you can purchase separately, and those attack values may be different. So that may be greater or less than 6 for those ships, but for these ships that come in the base game, you got to roll a 6 or better, and then that depends on your modifier. If you get a hit from your roll, then the target who was hit draws 1 damage counter from the container with your damage counter, secretly looks at it, and puts it face down in his play area. If the drawn counter has a plus on it like this, then you must draw an additional counter. So you would place that face down and then draw an additional counter. If the additional counter again had a plus on it, then you wouldn't have to draw another one. But the first one you draw when you take damage, if it has a plus, then you have to draw an additional one. So you keep that secret. The enemy doesn't know how much damage you've taken. However, if your damage you've taken is ever equal to your structure value, so that's a 14 on the Vipers, a 15 on the Cylon Raiders, then you have to declare that your ship has been destroyed and you remove it from the board. However, firing is simultaneous, so if both ships were firing at each other and this ship fired on him and he drew a damage counter and was going to be destroyed from the amount of damage he had taken, he would still get to do his fire before he removes his ship. He would still get to fire, and the other ship would have to take damage. Then he would remove his ship from the play area. Any damage counters that the eliminated ship had in its area are shuffled back into the container of undrawn damage counters. Some of the damage counters have a symbol on them, an icon on them. Those are not used in the quick start rules, so we'll talk more about those when we get to the complete game. So if you drew this, you would ignore that symbol. That would be 3 damage, and then a plus. You would have to draw another one if that was your first drawn combat damage counter of that attack. But I just wanted to mention on the quick start rules, those symbols are not taken into account. Alright, so after the firing or weapons phase, as long as the scenario objective has not been met. So in this scenario that we're playing, if one side's ships are eliminated, then the other side wins. So if this guy fired on him, got a hit, and he was not eliminated, hadn't accrued enough damage that his ship is eliminated, then you would start another round with the planning phase, and then do planning, moving, and then firing again, and continue until you've met whatever the scenario objective is. Alright, so that's the rules for the quick start. Let's get on and talk about the complete game and see what rules, additions, and changes there are. Alright, for the complete rules, you'll need a few more things. You'll need to add this change direction card back into each player's maneuver deck. You'll set your shooting markers with this icon somewhere nearby. And you'll need your drift rulers and just set them somewhere near the play area. One new concept that will be introduced with the complete rules is kinetic energy and acceleration. You'll see your ship card. The Vipers have an acceleration of 3, whereas the Cylon Raiders have an acceleration of 4. When you're starting the game, you'll set your kinetic energy to one of the settings from -1 to 6, your choice. But then when you are choosing a maneuver, you cannot choose a maneuver that will increase your kinetic energy higher than what it currently is, plus its acceleration, or lower than what it currently is, minus its acceleration. So in other words, if at the beginning of the game I had set my kinetic energy to 1, and then I choose in the planning phase my maneuver card and my speed, and when I reveal my maneuver card, it shows what my kinetic energy will be at speed 1. I used the number 1 there. That is also the kinetic energy. So I would set my kinetic energy to 1, which it already is, and that's legal because my acceleration is 3. If I had set my speed to 3 and revealed my maneuver card, then I would be using speed 3, or fast. I guess it's slow, medium, fast. I would be using fast speed with a kinetic energy of 3, so when I reveal my card, I have to adjust my kinetic energy to 3, which is still legal because that's only an increase of 2, and my acceleration is 3. So the difference in my change of kinetic energy is still less than my acceleration, so that is a legal maneuver, and then I could, move my 3. However, if my kinetic energy was set to 1 and I revealed chose my maneuver card and set my speed to fast, and I reveal my first maneuver card is an overboost, which has a kinetic energy of 3, and then I had chose my second maneuver card, I had set at speed fast, which is also 3, that would be a kinetic energy of 6, a total of 6. Well, my acceleration is only 3, so the best kinetic energy I could choose is 1, 2, 3, 4, because 1 plus 3 is 4. So I could not choose maneuver cards that give me a kinetic energy of more than 4. Or if my kinetic energy was set at 5, I could not play a card that would put me down to a stop, because that would be 0 kinetic energy, and the lowest I could do is go down to 2, 4, 3, 2, because my acceleration is 3. So the lowest, if my kinetic energy is 5, the lowest total kinetic energy maneuver cards I could play is 2. So the lowest I could go is 2, and the maneuver I revealed would have to be 2. So just to state it again, you can't play a maneuver card that'll give you a kinetic energy higher than your current kinetic energy plus your acceleration of 3 for the Vipers, or lower than your current kinetic energy minus 3 for the Vipers. Now for the Cylon Raider, your acceleration is 4, so that gives you 1 extra point of acceleration you can use for planning your maneuvers. Alright, another change to take into account with the complete rules is rotation. So if your spaceship is standing still, in other words you have the switch down here to the stopped or standing still position, or if you planned a straight maneuver, then you can set a rotation to your ship. So that will have your ship flying in one direction, but you can turn and shoot in another direction from which you were flying. So if you wanted to do that, maybe this guy wanted to, maybe there was a Cylon Raider here and he was moving this way, so he may want to turn rotate his ship so that it's facing this way, even though his inertia is this way. So again, when you're planning your maneuver, if you're going to have it set to stopped, or if you're planning a straight maneuver, you can set your rotation by turning this dial. Let me just get off camera and do it. So there, I've turned the dial so it's rotated 90 degrees. So, 30, 60, 90. So if I had played a straight maneuver card, we'll just say maybe I had set my speed to 2. I would have to move my kinetic energy to 2, which is fine because that's only 1 more than what I was at. And I execute my maneuver at 2, like so. And then I could rotate. I leave my base of my ship facing the direction that the ship is moving, but then I can rotate this top portion to point the ship. I would rotate it 90 degrees from the direction that it's traveling. So the 0 still remains traveling like that, but let me rotate it. I'll have to put the camera down to do that. So you can see I've rotated the ship, so now he's aiming in the direction and can fire in the direction of the Cylon Raider, even though the direction of his ship, where the 0 is pointing, so it's still moving this way, but it's pointed this way. So again, that's rotation is a new thing that you take into account. Now, when your ship is rotated, the next time you want to, in the next turn, when you're planning your maneuver, you can only do one of 2 things. You can use inertial movement, where you'll plan a move. It can only be a straight move at the same kinetic energy. You can't change your kinetic energy, so you couldn't change your speed, and your movement would have to be straight, and you would continue moving in the same direction. So you could reveal, another straight medium speed with kinetic energy of 2, so it doesn't change. And then you would put it like that, and your ship would just continue moving in that direction. Now you could also decide you wanted to adjust your rotation and move this dial. Let me put the camera down. You could adjust your rotation further again, and so then you could rotate your ship to 150 degrees, and that would allow you to rotate your base like this. So now you're still pointed and still have your firing arc pointed at the ship and still be able to fire at him, even though your movement is still traveling in this direction. So that's one thing you can do, is inertial movement, where you can just play a straight maneuver without changing your kinetic energy. And so you'll keep moving in the same direction you had been moving, but you can set your rotation so your ship rotates further. The other thing you can do when your ship is rotated for its maneuver is change direction. To change direction, you'll play a change direction card, maneuver card, along with any other maneuver card that is not an overboost. So in this example, I'm going to say I'm going to play this one. So let's say we reveal reveal that I'm at speed 3, and I'm doing a change direction, and so I'll be using a kinetic energy of 3. I'm currently at 2, but before you adjust your kinetic energy to 3, you have to get your drift ruler, which is this one. If you were moving at a kinetic energy of 1 or 0 or -1 prior, then you don't need the drift ruler. But if you were moving at kinetic speed of 2 to 4, you'll need this side. If you were moving at a kinetic energy of 5 to 6, then you'll need this side. So I reveal I'm doing a change of direction. My kinetic energy will change to 3 since I revealed that I'm doing a 3 or a fast speed. But before doing that, we got to use our drift ruler, and he's got to drift in the direction he was moving previously first. Now your ship will change direction, so you'll move the base to be in line with the direction that your ship is going. So you leave the ship in the direction it was pointing, but you adjust the base, so now you show that that is the direction that it is going. You also reset your rotation dial to 0, like so. Then you'll adjust your kinetic energy to the new setting and execute your maneuver, which I'm at 3, so then I would then execute this maneuver. Oops, it's kind of hard to do it one-handed. But there we go. So that would be a change direction. So I've kind of been showing the new concepts, the kinetic energy and the rotation and the change direction. But there is a little change to the movement step that I haven't mentioned. The movement step is now broken up into several different steps. You have the first movement step, then the first firing step, then the second movement step, and then the second firing step. So the only real difference is now if you are executing a overboost maneuver or a change direction maneuver, something that's going to give you 2 maneuver cards instead of 1. After you reveal your first maneuver card, you then have the opportunity to fire at that time if you have somebody in your firing arc and range. If you choose to fire at that time, then you have to put one of these shoot markers in your area showing that you've shot, and then after you move with your second maneuver card during the second firing step, you don't get a chance to fire at that point. If you don't choose to fire after your first maneuver step, then you don't place one of these shoot markers, and then you can fire after your second maneuver step. So let's just show, for example, say the Cylon here. He's played 2 cards. He's going to do an overboost. So what he's going to do when he reveals his cards, he knows he's going to do an overboost, which is a kinetic energy of 3, and then he set his speed to medium, so that's a kinetic energy of 2. So he's got to move his kinetic energy to 5, which that's fine because he could go all the way up to 6 with an acceleration of 4. So he reveals his first, which is his overboost card. So he'll place that and then move his ship to the end of that overboost card. So now he has the opportunity to fire if he has somebody in range and in his line of sight. So as I mentioned, if he did, which I don't think he does at this point, he couldn't fire, but if he did, he could go ahead and fire and then place one of those shoot markers showing that he already fired, and then he can't fire after a second movement step. But if he doesn't fire, then he just goes ahead and carries out the second movement step by revealing the other card he played with his overboost, takes that. Remember, he played a 2 medium speed, so he just aligns that up like that, and then finishes his movement like so. And now if he didn't fire the first time, then during the second firing step, he can now fire. And so it's the same with the change direction. When you reveal your change direction card, you would do your drift, and then of course reset your direction and your rotation dial. Then you would have the opportunity to fire at that time for the first firing step. And then if you choose not to fire, if you do fire, then you put a shoot marker, and then you can't shoot in the second firing step. But if you don't fire, then you go ahead and put your second maneuver card where you go ahead and do your maneuver, and then you have the opportunity to fire during the second firing step if you didn't fire during the first firing step. And then you just remove, after the end of the second firing step, you just remove all the shooting markers and move on to the next turn. And kind of just like in the quick start rules, if you make an illegal move, like if you planned something other than a change direction or a straight maneuver when your ship is rotated, then you have to replace it with a straight maneuver and draw a damage counter. Or if the speed you planned along with the card you played for your maneuver exceed your acceleration, then you have to adjust your speed back to what would make it legal with your acceleration, and then you have to draw a damage counter. And like with the quick start rules, if you play a maneuver that the g-force is greater than 4, or if your speed does not match one of the maneuvers on the card, then you'll also have to replace that with a straight maneuver and adjust your speed if necessary and draw a damage counter. Some other quick changes to talk about. We had mentioned in the quick start rules, if ships end up with their bases overlapping, I said the ship that was set to the faster speed would end up just moving straight until the bases are no longer overlapping, and then neither of those ships could fire. There's a little bit of a change with the complete rules. With the complete rules, if ships end up overlapping, you replace one or both of the ships with one of these base templates and just place it, where the other ship was. So I'm going to have to set the camera down real quick. So you set a base template in the exact same direction as the ship was or the ship's base was, and you can replace just one of the ships or both of the ships with a base template, and then you keep it that way until the ships move and their bases are no longer touching. And unlike the quick start rules where they can't fire at all, they can still fire at other ships and be fired at by other ships, but they cannot fire at each other as long as their bases are still touching. So anyway, you can just replace these with the ships when their bases are touching. Alright, there are also a few changes in the complete rules to combat when you're firing. Normally you would check in the quick setup rules, you just check if you're within the firing arc and then check the distance and then roll 2 dice, and you need to get your attack value of 6, and then the dice roll can be modified with either +1 if you're in the red, not modified if your range is in the medium, and a modifier of -1 if it's in the long range. Well, there's some additional modifiers in the complete rules. If the attacker's kinetic energy is 5 or more, then you subtract 1 from the attack roll. If the target's kinetic energy is 0, in other words, they're just standing still, then you add 1 to the attack roll. If the target's kinetic energy is 4 or more, then you subtract 1 from your attack roll. Unless their maneuver that round was a change direction, and then if that's the case, you don't have to subtract 1 from the attack roll. Alright, another change with the complete rules is if you draw a damage token. I mentioned in the quick start rules, if it has a symbol, you just ignore that. You would just take this as 2 damage. And because it has a plus symbol, then you would draw an additional damage token. But in the complete rules, if you draw this damage token when you take damage, that signifies engine damage. And so your kinetic energy, your acceleration value is halved, rounded up. So it would go down, you would have an acceleration of 2 going forward for both of them, because that would be halved, so you'd be down to 2, and this would be down to 2 because it's halved, rounded up. So anyway, when you draw one of these, your acceleration is halved, rounded up. If you were to take another hit, or take this one where you got to draw another one, and you were to draw another one that matched this symbol, then your kinetic energy is stuck where it is, and you can no longer play a maneuver card that would change your kinetic energy. So you would just, if you were at fast speed, you would have to continue playing cards that matched that kinetic energy of 3. If you draw a damage token with this symbol, then that means your control systems are damaged. And what that does is, normally you can play maneuver cards with a G value up to 4, not greater than 4. If you draw one of these, then your G value maximum is 3, so you couldn't play maneuver cards with a G value greater than 3. If you were to draw a second one of these, then you can no longer rotate your spaceship during that game. If your ship was already rotated, you could still go ahead and play a change direction to rotate your base back in alignment with the ship's direction, but you wouldn't be able to play and you wouldn't be able to change direction then in the future after you did that. If you draw one of these symbols, then that means your pilot is wounded and you can no longer plan difficult maneuvers. You can't do any difficult maneuvers, and you have to subtract 1 from all your attack rolls. If you were to draw a second one of these, then your pilot is severely wounded and you have to subtract 2 from all your attack rolls. And you have to select your movement cards for the next turn during the second step of the current maneuver phase, the second movement step. So that may be before all the other players have completed their movement, and you can't change it. You cannot change the maneuver cards you select then at that time. You can still, during the planning step, change your acceleration on your command console or your rotation, but you will have to have already selected the maneuver card or cards you're going to play during the second movement step of the current turn. And finally, if you draw one with this symbol, that means your hull is damaged and you can no longer play overboost cards. If you draw a second one of these, then your spaceship is severely damaged and your kinetic energy is going to drop 1 each turn until it reaches 0, and you can only do inertial movement. In other words, you can only play straight maneuver matching the current direction of your ship and matching the current kinetic energy. And as I said, each turn the kinetic energy is going to drop until it reaches 0, and then your ship will just stand still. So that would not be very good. Alright, those are all the changes for the complete rules. Now I'm just going to talk about real quick about some of the optional rules. Alright, so real quick, some of the optional rules are aiming. If you're shooting at a target that you missed on the previous turn, but you're attacking the same target this turn, then you get to add 2 to your attack roll. Or if you're shooting at a target that you hit the previous turn, you get to add, and you're shooting at it again, you get to add 3 to your attack roll. But in either of those cases, if you get a hit after you've added either 2 or 3 to your attack roll, and the opponent has to draw a damage counter, then you don't get that aiming bonus on the next turn if you're firing at them again. Alright, another optional rule is these blank maneuver cards. So if you're playing a change direction or a overboost, you play 2 maneuver cards. So when you're doing that, other players, they see you put 2 maneuver cards down, they probably know you're going to do a change direction or an overboost. So with this rule, with these blank maneuver cards, you can add that along with any maneuver card you play, so it always looks like you're playing 2 maneuver cards, so they don't know, your opponent doesn't know if you're playing an overboost or a change direction, because you're always playing at least 2 maneuver cards. Now if you're doing an overboost or a change direction, you wouldn't add this in to have 3 maneuver cards. So it's only if you're playing 1 maneuver card, but you're kind of bluffing that you're playing 2. So you can add that or not. The other attack modifier, the other optional rule is rolling doubles. Say you roll 2 3s, instead of counting that as a 6, you can count it as 2 rolls of 3. And then if you have an attack modifier, maybe if you had shot at a target the previous turn and hit them, so now this time you're shooting at the same target. If you're using that aiming rule where you get to add 3 to your attack roll, then you could treat the doubles as 2 separate attacks and get 2 separate hits, and they would have to draw 2 damage counters. So splitting the doubles into 2 attacks if you think your attack modifier is enough to create hits with both dice. And again, that's optional. Another optional rule is fuel. Some scenarios may say you have a certain amount of fuel, or you can agree amongst each other you have a certain amount of fuel, say 50 fuel. And then with each maneuver card, you can count its G value that you spend in G values as subtracting from that fuel. Or for each notch you turn on your rotation, might subtract 1 from your fuel. If you adjust your kinetic energy, then you spend the amount of fuel, the difference between the previous value and the new value. Then if you run out of fuel, you can no longer rotate your ship, and you can no longer change the kinetic energy. It just uses inertial movement going in the direction it was moving with the kinetic energy that it currently had when it ran out of fuel. Unless its kinetic energy was at 0, where it will just stand still. Alright, another optional rule is tailing. If you're behind a ship and you can measure with this side of the ruler, if they're within your firing arc and you can measure from your ship's base or post, or the stand from your base to the stand of their base, if it is closer than this star on the range ruler there, then you're tailing the opponent. And if they're planning maneuver cards, they have to show you their maneuver card. They have to show you their first maneuver card, or if they're only doing one maneuver card, they have to show you that maneuver card in the planning phase, only to you, not to any other players if you're playing with more than 2 players. But they have to show you the first maneuver card that they're going to play in the planning stage. And then you can choose your maneuver card, accordingly. Now, if they're playing 2 maneuver cards, an overboost or a change direction, they only have to show you the overboost or the change direction card. They don't have to show you the second card they're playing. But if they're only playing 1 card, then they have to show you that. Alright, you may also have noticed on these control panels, there's a thing we haven't talked about over here for altitudes. It's got +1, 0, and -1. So one of the optional rules is 3-dimensional space. And if you're using that rule, then space is divided into 4 levels. You can see you can add posts. So this ship would be at level 2, where this one would be a level 1. So during the planning phase, you can, change your level by going +1 or -1, or just stay at the level you're at by setting it to 0. If you do plan a maneuver and plan to change your level, if you're changing your level, you cannot play an overboost or a change direction or a reverse. And similar to an overboost that has a kinetic energy of 3, when you change your altitude, that costs a kinetic energy of 3, and then in addition to the cards you play. So again, you have to make sure that that total is not greater than your acceleration. So if you did plan a level change, then in the first movement step, you don't execute your movement card. Instead, you just announce your level change and adjust, the number of posts, either removing or adding posts to adjust your level on your ship, but you don't execute your maneuver card. If you did a rotate, then you can go ahead at the end of the first maneuver step and rotate your ship. And then during the second movement step, then you use your maneuver card normally. If you do an illegal move of planning a +1 level change when you're already at level 4, or a -1 level change when you're already at level 1, then that illegal maneuver eliminates your ship. So what do the differences in levels make? Well, you can't fire at a ship or tail a ship if you're using that optional tailing rule. If it is 2 levels, if the difference in levels is 2 or more. If spaceships are on a different level, any different level at all, then when you're measuring distance for attack, the ship is never at short range. It could only be at medium or long range. And I think that pretty much covers the distance, the three-dimensional space rules there. Since this video is going long, I'm just going to briefly go over. There are asteroid fields and planetoids that can be added to your game, and they have various effects. And if you move into the asteroid field or whatever, you may have to draw a damage, collision damage counter or something. But the rules for that can be found in the rule book if you're interested in this game. Some scenarios may call for certain pilots to be used, like Apollo, or those are just extra stickers, but it comes with Apollo, or there's also these Cylon pilots, and then also some like Nugget, Rookie, Average, Expert pilots. So some scenarios may call for those, and they give you, like, he has like a +2 hit modifier, and then the scenario may determine what talents or flaws that pilot has. And then you'll find those talents and flaws in this deck of cards, and they tell you what the effect of those are. So you can, the scenario may call for some of those, or you may just decide to add, them in on your own, however you want to do. But again, those are all optional, and I'm not going to go into all the details of all that because this video would go on for another 30 40 minutes. And some of the expansions may add other named pilots, like I think there's a Starbuck and some others. So I think that's pretty much as I'm going to cover as far as rules explanation. I'll go ahead and go through a few turns using the complete rules. I probably won't throw in any of the optional rules, and we'll just see how that works for a few turns and then wrap it up. Alright, so we'll just go through a couple of example turns here. Still just using 2 ships to make this a little quicker. So alright, so both players will plan their movement. And we'll just say that our Viper pilot will be starting with a starting kinetic energy of 1. Remember, you can set that to whatever you want at the beginning of the game. And we'll just say this Cylon player is going to start with a starting kinetic energy of 2. So they're both still pretty far apart from each other, so they may want to just try to move at a fast speed to get closer to each other. Now the Viper pilot, since his kinetic energy is 1 and his acceleration is 3, he can't play anything that's going to put him at a higher kinetic energy than 4. So we'll just say he's gonna pick this straight maneuver card. He'll set his speed to 3. He's not going to do a rotation or anything, so he'll just keep that hidden from the other player until they select theirs. Now the Cylon player, he has a kinetic, or he has an acceleration of 4, and he started with his his kinetic energy at 2. So he can play kinetic energy of all the way up to 6. So that's what he's going to do. He's going to do an overburst of a 3 straight, and then he's going to set his speed to 3, and he's going to do this maneuver. So that's a total kinetic energy of 6, which he can do because he has an acceleration of 4. So he'll be able to go all the way up to 6. So those are the cards he chooses. He selects those, selects his speed. Again, he's not going to do any rotation or anything either, so he says he's ready. All right, so now they've both finished the planning step. So now we go to the first maneuver step. So our first movement step. So both players will reveal their panels and adjust their kinetic energy for, if they played 2 cards, they got to adjust the kinetic energy for both cards. So we know he just played 1 card with a kinetic energy of 3 because he went on fast movement, so he adjusts his kinetic energy up to 3. We know the Cylon chose fast speed, and he chose an overboost, so he's got a kinetic energy of 6. So he's going to adjust his up to 6. Then each player reveals their first or only maneuver card. So the Viper pilot here, for the Colonial player, would reveal his, he only played 1, he would reveal his 1 card. The Cylon player would reveal his first card, which is his overboost card. They then execute that movement. So the Viper pilot here, he did a 3. So he would, oops, so I moved that a little further than I should, but again, it's kind of hard doing this with one hand. Alright, that just goes back into his deck of maneuver cards. The Cylon player moves his to the end of this card. And now he'll leave that there because he'll need it for his second movement card when he gets to the second movement step. But we finished now the first movement step. So now, oh, and if anybody had done a rotation on their control panel, they could rotate their ship now, but nobody did. So now we go to the first firing step. Neither player is going to fire because they're not in range. So nobody's going to fire in the first firing step. So now we go to the second movement step. So players that played more than 1 card now reveal that and execute that. So now we remove this, move his his second maneuver card there against his overboost, then put him where he goes. Remember, because he did play fast, so he's going on the 3 there. Now we can just remove those, go back to his deck with those. And now we go to the second firing step. So we can check if, I think both of them are in each other's firing arc. Yeah, this guy's in this guy's firing arc. Ah, Lord. I knocked that. And this guy, that's why I like using the laser. So they're both in each other's firing arc. And they look like they're just at long range. Yeah, I'd say it's borderline. So we'll say long range. So they both say they want to fire. Now remember, long range is going to subtract 1 from the die roll. So we'll do for the Viper pilot first. So we know he's got to subtract 1. And because the target's kinetic energy is 6, and if it's 4 or more, you got to subtract 1. So he's going to end up having to subtract 2 from his roll. He got a 3, so he doesn't hit. Alright, it was long range also for the Cylon Raider. his target's kinetic energy is only 3, so it's not 4 or more. So he doesn't subtract 1 for that, but if the attacker's kinetic energy is 5 or more, which his is 6, then you do subtract 1 for that. So he's got to subtract 2 also. So he got a 6 minus 2, that's a miss. Alright, they both miss, so now we go to the planning phase again. So we'll say the Viper pilot, he's going to do an overburst this time. He's going to do an overburst swinging out kind of wide to the right, and then he's going to set his speed to fast and come around back left. And so that's going to be a G-force of 4, so that he's not over the allowed G-forces. He can do up to 4, so he's good there. And that's kinetic energy of 6, which he can go up to because he's currently at 3, and his acceleration is 3, so a 6 is fine. So that's the maneuver he's going to choose. And so he'll stay at fast speed. So he's gonna, that's he hides his panel and his cards, and he just says he's ready. Alright, and we'll say the Cylon, he's going to do an overburst straight again, but he's going to go down to medium speed and just go straight. And because he's only doing a straight, he can also rotate. So I think he's going to rotate. So he's going to set his rotation dial, so he's rotating to 270 degrees or left 90 degrees. And he's got his speed set to 2. So, all right, their planning step is over. So now they both are ready. Say their planning is done, and they're ready to move on to the movement step. All right, so both players reveal their control panels and adjust their kinetic energy. We know his is going to be 3 plus 3 is 6. So we know he's going up to 6, which that's legal because he was at 3. We know the Cylon player reveals his. He put his down to a 2, so he's going to have a 3 plus 2, so his kinetic energy will only be 5, which is fine. But now they each reveal their first maneuver card and execute that. So they both did an overboost. So we'll just do the Viper pilots first. So we know he's going to go here. And we know the Cylon Raider is going to go here. But he also did a rotate, so now at this point he'll also rotate. So we'll rotate his ship to the position that he did up with his rotation. Move this. Alright, now we go to the first firing step. Well, this guy obviously can't fire because he's not pointing at any target, but the Cylon definitely is in a good position to fire. So in the first firing step, he says he is going to fire. So we'll place a shooting marker next to his ship to mark that he's firing. I'll now check the range, and he's definitely in close range. So he'll get to add 1, but his target's kinetic energy is more than 4, so he's got to subtract 1. So those just nullify each other. And then because the attacker's kinetic energy is 5 or more, he's got to subtract 1. So it's going to be -1 from whatever his roll is. Alright, he got an 11, so that's definitely a hit. So the Viper player has to reach in, draw a damage token. He looks at it, he knows he's got 3 damage, but he's fine. He can take up to 14, so he doesn't have to say what that is. He just puts it face down in his play area. Alright, so now we go to our second movement step. I should have left those cards there from their first movement step, since they both have one more card. So, alright, so the Viper pilot will perform his second movement step, where we know he is now going to move here. Alright, now we can remove both of those movement cards. Alright, and the Cylon player, he played this one where he just, and he's at medium speed, so he's facing this direction, so he's going to move to right there. And now we would be at the second firing step, but this guy's already fired, so he can't fire again, and this guy has no target in his firing direction, so he can't fire. Alright, we'll do one more turn. So now we go back to the planning step. So first we'll look at our Viper pilot. He wants to turn around to get a good shot at this. So he's going to play this turn maneuver. It's going to be a difficult maneuver. And he's going to play it at 1. Which is going to be, well, that would be 1 kinetic energy, but he can't drop that low because deceleration or acceleration is only 3. He's at 6 kinetic energy, so unfortunately he can only go down to a 3 kinetic energy, so he's going to have to play that at 3. So yeah, he would want to just kind of stop and turn, but he's already moving too fast, so he can't slow down that much, so he's going to have to pull on this. He's going to have to do this maneuver at a 3. Alright, so that's his card. He's setting that. Because he's turning, he can't rotate. You can only do that if you're stopped or do a straight maneuver. So anyway, that's his choice. The Cylon the Cylon Raider pilot, since he's rotated, he only has 2 choices. He can do inertial movement, and because he's at a 5 kinetic energy, he would have to play 5 kinetic energy worth of straight movement, where he would keep going this way. He could rotate still further, but that would take him further away from his target than he wants to go. Even though if he rotated, well, he might still be in range, but I just want to show a change of direction anyway. So he could do inertial movement and keep going straight that way and rotate his ship and hopefully still be in range, depending on what this guy does, to get another shot. Or he can change direction, so he's going to play his change direction along with another movement card. So for his second movement card, he'll plan this turn. He's going to stay at 2. Now that gives him a 4 G-forces, so he's good with that. So he chooses, that's it, 2 cards he chooses. He's going to stay at speed 2. Alright, so now he's ready. So they both are finished with the planning phase, so now we go to the first movement step. So this player reveals his panel and his first and only card and adjusts his kinetic energy. He's set to 3, so his kinetic energy is going to go down to 3, which is fine. And he couldn't do any rotation. Now he is doing a difficult maneuver, so he's got to take a difficult maneuver token and put that in his area, so he knows on his next turn he can't do another difficult maneuver nor an overboost. Cylon player reveals his and says he's doing a change direction, so before he adjusts his kinetic energy, he's got to drift. So his kinetic energy was 4, so he needs to get a drift ruler, set it to the 2 to 4 side, and he drifts this far. Now that he's done his drift, we can then adjust his base so it's pointing in the same direction that he is now. And then we turn his rotation back to straight. There we go. And then finally we set his kinetic energy to what it's going to be, which is 2. Now, this is the first movement step, so the Viper Colonial player has to go ahead and execute his movement, which he was set to 3. So he's going to turn, but that's not, oops. It's going to put him there. It's hard doing this with one hand and not moving these ships around. All right. So that's the end of the first movement step. Nobody's in any kind of position to fire. So now we go to the second movement step. So the Cylon player will execute his second maneuver card, which is at a 2. So that will put him right there. Ugh. All right. I think that's about where it should be. And again, nobody's in any position to fire on each other. I think that's all I'm going to do right there because this video is running long, and I think I've showed pretty much how it works. So if we were playing that Hand of God scenario, we would just continue playing until one ship takes enough damage that it's destroyed. Its damage equals its structure. So the only one that's damaged so far is this guy with 3 points of damage. But I think you can see how the game works. These type of games, this one, the Battlestar Galactica, Starship Battles, X-Wing miniatures, Star Wars Armada. To me, these games are not at all fun to play by yourself because you're kind of supposed to be outwitting and outmaneuvering the other player, but when you're the other player, you know exactly what each model is going to do. So it's really not fun to play these by yourself. But I do find these pretty fun playing against another player. I've never played with more than 2 players, but this game is fun. I did buy some of the expansions, but I haven't had a chance to play it against somebody else using any of the expansions yet. But just for an example, you can see for the Colonial player, I bought the Raptor here, and for the Cylon player, I got this named Cylon Raider Scar. So I'm sure it comes with some cards in there, and I don't know what else, different rules for those in play, I guess. Maybe some more scenarios. As you see, I haven't opened it. I'm waiting until I play this game again with somebody else. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I had kind of forgot about it. I had it in the bottom of my closet until I started rewatching Battlestar Galactica, and I said, hey, I have a game on that. So anyway, I think I'm going to wrap it up. I think this game is fun. The quick start rules are good just to introduce somebody to it, but I think it is more fun when you start adding in the complete rules and maybe some of the optional rules and pilots and that kind of thing. And as I said, some of the scenarios call for that. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.